Here we are yet again, back with Myrna and Jenn read the Apocrypha. And Myrna and I, yes, we are enjoying this topic. We're loving reading through this. If you haven't found the interest or the interesting things found in the Apocrypha and you're wanting to look at something, please, you found us, keep following. Go back and see all the other stuff. Like, comment, all those things here on the YouTube channel, because we're getting into the good stuff, especially today. Because we have these demons that are living on the earth. Like, there were a bunch of them, but they got reduced down to 10%. And there's this leader called Mastema. And in this iteration of the Apocrypha in Jubilees chapter 18, we're going to see this moment where Abraham goes to sacrifice Isaac. But we're finding in this version, then in the King James Bible version, that Mastema has approached God and basically said, "Oh, you've got Abraham. He is so like righteous and does everything right, and he's a goody two-shoe boy." That's how I interpreted Mastema. and the Lord has now said, "Hey, let's see. He's righteous and he will do anything I ask, and he will be obedient." And Mastema is not convinced. Let's see what happens as we get into chapter 18 of Jubilee. Let's go.
Do it.
Let's do it. Okay. So, and God said to him, "Abraham, Abraham." And he said, "Behold, here am I." And he said, "Take thy beloved son, whom thou lovest, even Isaac, and go into the high country, and offer him on one of the mountains which I shall point out unto thee." And he rose early in the morning and saddled his ass, and took his 2 young men with him, and Isaac his son, and clave the wood of the burnt offering. And he went to the place on the 3rd day, and he saw the place afar off. Well, that's pretty righteous right there. And I want you to go into the mountains, and you're gonna, you're gonna do an offering.
Who are these? Take his 2 young men. So are we talking Well, Ishmael's gone. So Isaac and who did
must be 2 workers, so that, because remember, he's over 100 at this point.
Yeah.
And he probably needed other help doing the wood. That's a lot of wood to do a burnt offering that size.
That's true. That's true. Okay. I can
So
understand.
2 young workers possibly.
Yeah, okay.
And
yeah, that's that's kind of a hard travel, but well, their 100 isn't our 100.
No,
but,
it is not.
It's still hard. They're not young. He's not young. I think of it kind of like maybe he's like late 30s. That can be kind of a tough journey at that age, because that's heavy desert. That's hard.
Yes.
Hard stuff to walk in.
I do think it's interesting that the Lord does say, "and offer him on one of the mountains." There's no words that Abraham said back to God. He's like, okay,
at least not in here.
At least not in here. Not in this iteration. So yes, and he got everything ready in the morning, and they're heading off.
Yeah, because I assume he did say something. I mean, like, okay, here we go, or something, right? I assume he said something, but yeah, we don't have anything in here. But he didn't waste time.
No, the next morning he was done,
and he did it, right? Which, okay,
well, he's showing his obedience.
There's more kudos to him than me, because I think I might have waited a little bit.
I would have said, I can go on. My schedule's open Friday.
Yeah. Let's Friday. A weekend's a good day to do it.
Yeah. Oh wait. Oh, I'm going to the beach that day. We got to switch it.
Yeah. So that is a form of obedience. It's a kind of an example to us, right?
All right, okay, so I'm not so obedient. I get that now. All right.
I know I'm not. Yeah. All right, let's move on. And he came to a well of water, and he said to his young men, Abide ye here with the ass, and I and the lad shall go yonder, and when ye have worshipped, and when we had worshipped, we shall come again to you. And he took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on Isaac, his son. And he took in his hands the fire and the knife, and they went both of them together to that place. And Isaac said to his father, Father? And he said, Here am I, my son. And he said unto him, Behold the fire and the knife and the wood, but where is the sheep for the burnt offering, Father? I would think your heart would sink a little bit as a parent.
I think your heart would sink a bit when your kid is going, I'm kind of smart. I'm logical. We have the fire and the knife and all these things that say an offering, but where's the sheep? Like, I don't understand, Dad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he's like asking a point blank question. It's not like Abraham can forge the answer, so to speak.
Well, he can't lie, right? He does all the things. So, how do you get around that one? Don't worry for now, my son.
You just can't get around it.
Well, and I do give it interestingly here that this is the same situation that Heavenly Father finds himself in, right? He's going to sacrifice his own son. I do find it interesting that Isaac holds the wood on his back, just like Christ held his cross.
Yeah.
I feel like there's some symbolism here that Isaac and Abraham are having the same thing play out here like Heavenly Father did.
Yeah.
Or will, because it didn't happen yet.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there is a similitude happening.
Yes. So, let's see what he does.
Okay.
And he said, God will provide for himself a sheep for a burnt offering, my son. And he drew near to the place of the mount of God. And he built an altar, and he placed the wood on the altar, and bound Isaac his son, and placed him on the wood which was upon the altar, and stretched forth his hand to take the knife to slay Isaac his son. And I stood before him, and before the prince Mastema, and the Lord said, Bid him not to lay his hand on the lad, nor to do anything to him, for I have shown that he fears the Lord. That was a good comment.
Okay, now in the Bible, it doesn't say that that's Mastema.
Correct.
Because it does say that an angel stepped in and stopped him. But it doesn't say anything about Mastema.
So, right, it says the Lord, well, here it's saying the Lord said, bid him not lay his hand on him, and it was stopped. Yeah, but this is saying that Mastema was standing there too. Like a proof moment, right?
Well, yeah, absolutely. He's going to make, he wants to be there to see it actually happen.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't want to hear from somebody else.
Correct. I do like that phrasing though, for I have shown that he fears the Lord.
Yeah.
He feared the Lord more than the guilt of killing his own son.
Yeah, but I think the words are interesting that the Lord says, bid him not to lay his hand on the lad. Now he's talking to Mastema. So in the scriptures, could it be referring to, in our scriptures, to King James, referring to Mastema being the one to tell him not to kill the child?
See, I don't think here that it is well understood, because who is the I at the beginning there of verse 9? And I stood before him and before the prince Mastema, and the Lord said. So who's the I in that? Who was standing there?
I guess that could, I didn't look at that. I guess that could be the angel. But it also could be.
So, and the Lord said, bid him not to lay his hand on the lad nor anything to him, for I have shown that he fears the Lord. So it's almost like I picture, I don't know who the I is, except for the writer of this, right? Another angel recording, but the prince is there and the Lord's like, I've shown that he fears the Lord. You would think he would have said, I have shown that he fears me, but he didn't. So again, maybe this is part of why this is in the Apocrypha, because of the way that it's written. There are bits and pieces that aren't fully understood. I don't know. I would like to know who that I is.
Yeah.
But I do think that if he having that sense of he was being tempted, basically, I don't know if challenged, I guess is a better word, not tempted, challenged here. How much do you really obey God? Well, this is quite the challenge. I'm going to say, please do not challenge me to know how much I obey God.
Well, here's my question. We see this example here. We see the same sort of thing happen with Job.
Yes.
So my question is,
I know, here it comes.
Is it because they were righteous and Mastema wanted to, like you say, challenge them? Or is it because they were on the fence and Mastema wanted to win them, so he wanted to challenge them? That's my question. Was their faith on the fence, or was it because they were so obedient?
Where's that line of their obedience?
Yeah. Well, the question is why.
Yes, that is a question. Why?
If he is obedient, and we've seen it in the story when he was young, right?
Yes.
So he's already proven he is. So why are we challenging him with this? Why are we doing this now, Mastema? He's already proven it. Is it because you want to rule him out? Or, I mean, why? What's your deal here? I mean, and the same with Job. I mean, was it because they were so righteous that they just had to, in some way rule him out for something? Or was it because they were on that fence and Mastema knew if he could get them, he could get maybe generations, or he could get a lot of people going his way if he could get this one man that supposedly is very obedient.
Okay. What has God promised Abraham? That through Isaac would be his people, right? Would be God's people. So if he can get Abraham to not be obedient and to mess up, then maybe he felt he had an in that he would destroy God's plan.
Maybe. So maybe it's not necessarily Abraham that he's testing. Are we reading this all wrong all of these years? Everybody always talks about, is this your Abrahamic test?
Right.
Right? Is this your Abrahamic sacrifice? They make this big deal of it. But now that you bring this up, is it really that? Or is it simply Mastema saying, if I can get him to really kill Isaac, I've screwed up the Lord's plan. I might actually win. And then I'll go down to Lucifer and he'll give me everything because I will have made his plan come to fruition.
Well, because isn't that what that is the paradox of, to me, of some of the basic stories behind religion, at least a bunch of religions, Christianity, Judaism, and stuff. A lot of it all goes back to Abraham here and Abraham's promise. But when it comes to Satan, what is Satan always trying to do? The paradox is God's like, I'm going to win in the end. There is nothing Satan can do fully that will not have God win out in the end. But Satan's like, but I'm going to make sure some of your kids don't return. That's his job.
Yeah.
Some of your kids are not going to return. If I can get these ones, the pivotal ones, maybe I've done something.
Yeah, I've done something.
Because truthfully, here in this moment, in the challenge, how is Isaac taking this?
Yeah.
His dad finds him. He like, oh, I'm the sacrifice. Dad, why are you doing this? Dad, like, do you have a conversation while you're bound and tied to the altar with wood around you, ready to catch fire? Dad?
Well, actually, in the Old Testament, it says that Isaac asked to be bound.
Oh.
Whether that's true, I don't know. But it says that he knew what was happening and he asked to be bound so that he wouldn't stop it from happening.
Because he believed that God was asking his dad to do it. Because there's no reason his dad would do it otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a faith between the two of them, that there is a purpose.
Yeah. But this brings a whole new understanding to me, or thought to me. And it's not a very good one.
Are we going into the deep rough here, Myrna?
We might be going there, but we're also seeing Myrna's stinkeriness.
Okay, stinkeriness.
Are we just pawns for God to play with Master?
I think there are some people who could read it that way. And
I think you absolutely could read it that way.
You could.
Is that the way you should? Probably not, but
probably not.
I can see how people can see it that way.
I do see how people can see it that way, that we are just pawns in some higher being's playground.
Yeah, it reminds me of, that show. I have to laugh. Because that show called Twilight Zone.
Yes.
There's one where you see these people doing their daily routine, right? And then all of a sudden, a hand comes down and picks one of them up and moves them somewhere else.
Yeah.
And then something different happens. And then all of a sudden it pulls back. And you see God up there just moving people around. And it kind of gave you that idea of God just playing with us.
Right.
And I remember seeing that one time, and maybe that's why I'm so stinkery and I think about this, because I remember seeing that Twilight Zone and I was like, it really made my mind go, because I was only like 14, 15 or something. And I was like, is that really what God is doing? Is that really, it just took me a minute where I was like, is that really what's going on here? So maybe that's why my brain goes there, but it can seem like that, right? And it can I can see how people will say, well, that's not the God I believe in. But we have it's other things that have happened in the scriptures that do tell us that God does test us. Whether he's testing us in comparison to what Mastema wants, that's not always the case. I'm not saying that every time there's this struggle for this one person. I wouldn't think that I'm enough of a scare to Mastema that it's God and Mastema
talking about
what's going to happen with Myrna. But I think that this person, Abraham or Job, maybe they were enough of a threat to Mastema and what he thought was possible in thwarting God's plan. But sometimes you have to step back and just kind of go, it doesn't matter whether that's the situation. The whole reason we're here is to learn to obey God.
Mm-hmm. In fact, in Abraham 3:25 and in other scriptures, they use the term, and this is the one that came to me as we were reading this, prove them herewith. And that means that God will test and examine people through experiences and trials to see if they will choose to obey his commandments and abide in his covenants, ultimately determining their worthiness for exaltation.
Right. And I love the fact that God turns that around and tells you to prove him.
Yes. He does the same thing. He says, prove me. I keep all of my promises.
Yeah.
Trust me.
Where we talk about tithing, I can't remember what book that's in again. But he says that prove me herewith.
Yes.
That I will not open up the windows of heaven and bless you with more than you can hold.
So here's a moment where I could see it having that Twilight Zone feel of picking people up and we're pawns. But if you see what we consider the restoration of God, of the gospel, moving forward here, looking in the past and the forward, it is about the goal of exaltation. And you are being challenged and tried to say, hey, where are those lines for you that you will stay obedient? Where are those lines? Because can you be pushed too far where you're like, I'm not going to obey? I mean, I think we see it in the Book of Mormon with Nephi for a moment when he's told to take the sword and kill Laban. He's like, whoa. I pause for a second. I think you've taken me too far.
Yeah.
And yet he still shows that he was obedient.
Yeah.
It took a moment of a conversation, but he showed his obedience. Job showed his obedience. And Abraham here is showing it. Now, maybe it's not as dramatic, but do we have those moments in our lives? I think you and I have had those moments in our lives, Myrna, when it comes to the LGBT space. We have both chosen to stay in marriages to men and know that we experience same-sex attraction. Why? Because we understand and have a testimony of who God is and his character, and that the restored gospel has said same-sex marriage is not for exaltation. It's not of God at all.
Right.
So we have made it our choices and been obedient. Yeah. And people don't like it, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Because we get it on we get weird sides of it. People like,
get it from everywhere.
Why would you do that? You need to just be authentic to yourself. Well, I am, because part of my authenticness is being obedient to God.
Yeah. Well, and we get it from the other side too, where they say, why do you have to talk about this? Why do you have to say anything about it? Why can't you just keep it inside and deal with it? Well, actually, no, you can't.
No.
That's where you get your suicides. That's where you get your problems.
Yes. And it's being able to talk about it and show other people that they can talk about it and make choices for themselves.
Because how do I say this? It's kind of like when you have problems in life, what do? You talk through them. This can be a huge problem in life. If you cannot allow the space for someone to talk through these things, they'll never come to God's side. Never. Because that side has to be talked about. You have to talk to yourself and to God, and maybe even to a therapist, in order to come to that place. If you're going to be on God's side, it's not something that you can willy-nilly just one day, or kind of like,
oh, I'm good, let's move on.
Yeah. It absolutely cannot happen that way. There has to be discussions, whether it's just you and God, or whether it's you, God, and a therapist, or a friend, or whatever, you have to talk it through in order to solve the situation. It cannot be done any other way. One thing I wanted to say was, I think what is really important here is that it's not only that God is proving us. Mm-hmm. I think we sit back and we say, oh, I have to do whatever God says. Well, God asks you to prove him too. Mm-hmm. So make him live up to his promises. It's not just one-sided. It's not here for us to prove only. That's not what this whole life is only for us to prove to God what we can do. It's for us to prove what God can do for us, so that we can find him in our lives, so that we can see what he's like, so that we can learn who he is. Because what's our goal is to be like him. If we can't learn who he is and see how far he can be pushed, then we will never be able to be like him.
Right.
So it's a two-way street here. God's not only asking for us to be tempted or for us to be tried. He's asking us to do the same to him.
Well, just like a good leader would not ask somebody to do something they wouldn't do themselves.
Yeah.
Right? So God is saying, hey, I'm asking you to be obedient in this, and you can trust me in it because I hold to all of my promises.
And if you want to test me on that, test me on it.
Test me on it. That's fine.
No. So I think that's another part that's kind of important also, because I think we don't talk about that enough. Because he is willing, he is open to being tested too.
Right.
Because that's kind of what makes him God, is that you can't break him, so to speak.
No, you cannot.
All right, where are we?
Does not break. We are on verse 10.
Okay. And I called to him from heaven, and I said unto him, Abraham, Abraham. And he was terrified, and he said, Behold, here am I. And I said unto him, Lay not thy hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything to him. For now I have shown that thou fearest the Lord, and hast not withheld thy son, thy firstborn son, from me. And the prince Mastema was put in shame. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and beheld a ram caught by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered it for a burnt offering in the stead of his son. Okay. Again, here is that I, right?
Yes.
That must be the angel they're talking about.
It must be.
In the Old Testament. They've just left Mastema out.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Love how they said that he was terrified, but he still said, Behold, here am I.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas when Adam and Eve were asked where they were, they tried to hide and be quiet.
Right.
So Abraham has learned that whether he's afraid or not, he needs to answer God.
Right.
Or the angels that come from him.
And it's interesting here that they kind of this is repetition right here, because they said before that he said, Here am I, behold, here am I. And, it's kind of repeated about what the Lord said to him, thy firstborn, you haven't withheld him from me. And, then the reactions, Prince Mastema was put to shame. And then he sees the ram because the Lord provided. But I do think it's interesting that, it was his firstborn son. It would be hard to look at your firstborn son, someone that you waited for so long to have. And, he's possibly going to die at your hands because you are obeying your God.
Yeah.
Like, for a lot of humans, that would not be the outcome right there.
Oh no,
they would have refused the Lord.
Yeah, that would be another thing of, my God wouldn't do that.
Yeah. My God would not ask that of me, which is what we hear a lot. Yeah. Why would people say things about God all the time? Why would God have suffering? Why would he have my child die when he was just 3 years old? Why? And they get angry at God and stop believing that there is a God, because that's just a cruel God. God showed up in this moment and said, no, don't do it, and had an offering available. I think people turn their back on God in hard situations faster than anything else.
No, well, I have. I can admit I've done that before. Been mad enough at him that I've
It's easy to do. It's so easy to just be angry and say, forget you, and move on. But to me, this story is saying, if you stay in obedience, God will show you something more. But it's so hard to do. But maybe I don't fear God enough. So I think it's just interesting here that I think the lesson that this story is telling me is that if you stay in obedience to God, he will show you great things. He will provide for you. Yeah. But it's so easy in those moments to be angry and to turn your back on God, and then his hands are tied.
Yeah.
You tie his hands in what he can do. So this is a really good lesson. And, frankly, maybe I don't fear God enough. That's on me.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I think that whether you fear him or not, it's your final actions that he's going to look at. What you choose to do. But I think it's a little, what's the word? Telling of God's spirit, because all he said was that Mastaba was put to shame.
Right.
He didn't make fun of him. He didn't call him out. He didn't. He just said he was, he was embarrassed. I think that's an interesting way to handle it.
I know, right? He doesn't have to say anything to him. Just watching what Abraham and Isaac did was enough, was powerful enough.
Yeah.
It's like a mic drop moment.
Yeah, kind of.
There is nothing that needs to be said.
Yeah.
You thought you could get him, and I'm showing you, even with his most prized thing, I'm sorry that I called Isaac a thing, but I don't know, his most prized
possession.
I mean,
don't know.
I don't know what word to use there, people.
I don't either.
His most prized, he was willing to give it up for God.
Yeah. He's willing to give up the item or the person he loved the most.
Right.
All right.
And as we move on in 13, and Abraham called that place, the Lord hath seen, so that it is said in the mount, the Lord hath seen, that is Mount Zion. And the Lord called Abraham by his name a second time from heaven, as he caused us to appear to speak to him in the name of the Lord. And he said, by myself have I sworn, saith the Lord. He's going to say a nice little statement. But there you have it. So he actually named the place after it. The Lord hath seen.
Are you going to finish it?
Oh, sorry. Yes, that is mine. I sworn, saith the Lord, because thou hast done this thing, and hast not withheld thy son, thy beloved son, from me, that in blessing I will bless thee, and in multiplying I will multiply thy seed as the stars of heaven, and as the sand which is on the seashore, and thy seed shall inherit the cities of its enemies. See?
Okay. This is interesting to me because he already told him this was going to happen.
Yep.
But then the Lord says, because you did this, this is what's going to happen, which is what he already told him was going to happen. So is he really giving him something new? This is a stinkery thing of me. Is he really giving him something new? It's a stinkery.
Well, I think in this instance, he is restating what he has blessed him with, but he blessed him that he would multiply. And here, and in multiplying, I will multiply thy seed. So it's almost like I told you you would have this, and now I'm even broadening it more, is how I take it.
Except he said that he already told him that it will be as the stars in heaven, as the sand on the seashore. He already told him all of that. So it's interesting. That's just interesting to me. Is the Lord saying, okay, you earned it, but he already told him it was going to happen. I don't know. It's just a stinkery thing of me, and we probably can move on.
Well, okay. But to me, that takes it slightly into the realm of God knows all. You will have this, but maybe he knows he's going to have it, but this is the moment where he proved to himself that he gets it. I don't know. It's one of those weird
that's a way to look at it. That's a way to look at it. But also another way to look at it is, well, you already told me I was going to do that. Do you mean that I actually had to earn it? It sounded to me like I was going to have it, whether I didn't know I had to earn it.
I don't know.
Anyway,
it's one of those things where these days you would have somebody say, you need to basically talk in the present tense of something as if you already have it, and you thank God that you already have something that he hasn't yet given you.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's somewhat that moment, but that gets all mindy and hurts my head sometimes.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Interesting, though. There's so many ways to read that.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. Okay. The Lord continues, and in thy seed shall all nations of the earth be blessed, because thou hast obeyed my voice. And I have shown to all that thou art faithful unto me in all that I have said unto thee. Go in peace. And Abraham went to his young men, and they arose and went together to Beersheba. And Abraham dwelt by the well of the oath. And he celebrated this festival every year, 7 days with joy. And he called it the festival of the Lord, according to the 7 days during which he went and returned in peace. And accordingly has it been ordained and written on the heavenly tablets regarding Israel and its seed, that they should observe this festival 7 days with the joy of festival. Okay, that's interesting. So which is this a festival they still have?
It's called Festival of the Lord. I think one of them was also called that. Festival of the Lord. Okay. So when you put in like Festival of the Lord, it comes up like it's in Leviticus 23. There are 7 appointed times, including the Sabbath, Passover, unleavened bread, first fruits, Pentecost, trumpets, the Day of Atonement, and tabernacles. So those are festivals of the Lord.
Okay, so the festivals of the Lord of all of those together,
are those 7
each
together.
one of them for 7 days.
Yes.
Okay.
So it looks like in this instance that kind of fits. 7 days with joy, and he called it the festival of the Lord according to the 7 days during which he went and returned in peace. So that's why there would be 7. And that they should observe this with joy every year. So not that they have directly kept all of them the same exact thing, but it could be that one of these is one of the specific ones that it came in, or it was just another festival of the time that in the end changed into the, but it is that 7 days of celebrating the joy of him not, I guess, killing Isaac and having the promises of the Lord.
Yeah.
The Jewish people really do understand things in these jubilees, because 7, like when someone dies, they rent their clothing, they rip their clothing, and they don't do anything for a week. You don't go to work, you don't do anything. People come to you and bring food and all of that stuff, so that you can concentrate on the grieving process for those days and mourn the loss of that individual. It's just interesting how you see this cycle of 7s and festivals, which for us is a week, shows up.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah, all the time.
It's almost like it's structured that way.
Well, it probably is. Because it's the way they did it.
Yeah, and we get the written on the heavenly tablets again, which is something, it seems like we read in the scriptures, the book of life or something, that it's just, it is marked down.
Yeah.
Here's a new festival for you to go over. Oh, yay. More festivals. I mean, it just sounds like a party time. But if we remember last time, the festivals, it was like he had 7 it was like 7 goats and this many of this and that. It was a lot of animals being sacrificed. Not that they were partying and eating them.
No, he did it every day.
Yes, he did it every day for 7 days.
Every day he had to redo these animal sacrifices.
It was a lot of animals. And for us, we think of a festival as like getting together, eating and stuff. They probably did that, but it wasn't those animals. Those were just being burnt.
Those are the actual
so that the
offering
sweet savor went up to the Lord.
To God.
Yeah, the sweet savor.
They probably barbecued different animals to eat.
They probably did, because they do eat goat over there.
Because eventually they did say it was okay for them to eat of the rest of the animal that they did not use for the sacrifice, but it was only the priests that could do that.
Yes.
So you wouldn't have it for everybody at the party.
You would not.
So and it sounded like from one time when we read it that it was a very formal process that was done in actually doing the sacrifice. It wasn't like you just threw it all on the barbecue.
No. You cut it up specifically. You had to know what you were doing. You were taught how to do it properly. It was part of your upbringing as a man.
Yeah, the actual process was part of the ritual, basically.
Yep. Interesting.
Okay, so now we have a new festival.
We do have a new festival.
Sorry. And Abraham has passed the test, and the Lord still loves him.
Yep.
And now we're going to see the next step. I'm trying to remember who is next.
Well, there's
Jacob.
a lot.
Jacob.
Yes.
Right?
Isaac and Jacob. Well, we get the whole Esau and Jacob thing happening.
I think Jacob might be the next thing coming. I haven't read ahead, but
yes.
But there's a whole lot more. I love this because in our community, the LGBT community, that we do spend a lot of time in as we try to help people to stay within the church, which we believe is the true church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Correct.
This story is used all the time.
Yes, it is.
Right. And they always want to use it as being not living up to your desire in the LGBT community is your Abrahamic sacrifice.
Yes.
What I love about what we have learned today is there is a possibility of looking at this in different ways. It's not always about the person doing the sacrifice. What about Isaac? What about this relationship between Mastema and the Lord? What about what about the whole thing as a whole? There's so many different ways, and we've kind of broken that down as we have read this, because you don't see the part of Mastema in the Old Testament. And I'm not saying that this is all 100% correct, but it does give us another way of looking at this story. So it's not so much about making us feel good about not following our feelings in the LGBT community. Because sometimes I think we need to look on this story and we need to see other people's point of view, not just what we get out of it, putting ourselves in this space as Abraham, right?
Well, because it's too easy to say, this is my Abrahamic moment of sacrificing something that I dearly love and possess.
Yeah.
Well, do I dearly love and possess my same-sex attraction desires? Ooh, that's a question.
That's a big question.
It is a big question. And how much do I love them? And I think that's where people go, well, it is a part of me and I'm sacrificing a part of me, like Isaac was a part of him. And yet, does that really work? Does it really work to connect that? Or can I look at it at different ways and say, I am trying to figure out life and how to be obedient?
Well, yeah, and I don't know how well that fits in the story because it doesn't match in the same way that Isaac could have left. Isaac was obedient to his father and was willing to be that sacrifice that the Lord has asked. Correct. He even asked to be bound in order to not try to stop it from happening. We can't say that about our LGBT feelings. Stuff. Right? So sometimes when I break this story down, I often wonder if it really fits in what we use it for.
Right.
Because if we had that option where this could not be done, would we still be okay with letting our feelings leave?
Right.
Right? Are we so attached to it that we would not be okay with it leaving?
In this instance, Isaac was a completely separate human being from his father. And a lot of people in the community would say that their LGBT feelings, their same-sex attraction feelings, are a part of them. They cannot be separated. And so I think if you look deeper into it, maybe it doesn't work, but on the surface, we like to use it because, I had to sacrifice something so great. I don't know. I do think it's interesting that it gets used.
But I mean, what I'm saying is this still is a sacrifice of Abraham's, whether Isaac allows it to happen or not.
True.
If Isaac were to run away, the Lord can still say, Abraham, you were willing to do it.
Abraham fulfilled it.
Right? So if all of a sudden our feelings of same-sex attraction disappeared, would we still be willing to give of ourselves?
That's a good question.
Would we still be that obedient to God?
It's a good question.
I don't know.
Deeper questions that don't usually come up in conversations all the time.
No.
Because those are the questions we're not supposed to fully ask.
Well, those are the questions people don't want to have to answer.
No, they don't.
Right. But there's other things that happen, I know, that have happened in my life that literally answer that question. That I had to make an answer. I had to answer that if you ask that question by my choice that I made, you'd have the answer to that question.
Right.
But it was a separate thing that happened in my life that made me that committed. Does that make sense?
It does.
So that question, if you don't ask it in this situation, a lot of times God will have you answer it in some other way.
It still needs to be answered. Interesting. We went into the weeds and I love it.
That was a little deep. Sorry. Sometimes I can go there. Sometimes I don't. Anyway.
Okay, guys.
Yeah. There you go.
Whew. All right. We got through the Abraham and Isaac moment. A lot of questions to ask yourself about how you view this. Any comments or insights that anyone has about what we talked about, please put it in the comments or notes below. And we're so excited to continue to bring this podcast out to everyone. And as always, like we like to say, the Apocryphal rules. All right, guys, we will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.